Welcome to God Stories. This is the first episode. I'm super excited about this channel. Two quick things before we get into meeting our first guest. Two things this channel I want to accomplish is to glorify God through the testimony and His grace and mercy through this person who's about to come share. And two, if anyone watching this video has a similar situation that they're going through, it will give you hope to see somebody who's been through that and God's faithfulness through that. But without further ado, I would like to welcome our first guest to the channel, and it's going to be Andrew Aube. All right, so Andrew, if you can just give a quick introduction to the people, just who you are and just what you do right now.
So. Sure. My name is Andrew Aube. I'm 21 years old. I'm an assistant pastor here at Oasis of Praise. I also work full-time at the Mercedes-Benz automotive plant in Vance, Alabama.
Nice. So, to give just a little bit of background before you get fully into your testimony, just tell us a bit about what life was like before you really committed yourself to Jesus.
Life before Jesus.
Yes, just life with your BC area, your before Christ era.
I would say there's two stages to it.
Okay.
When I was a lot younger, I lived in South Carolina, and we always went to church, but I didn't really know what it meant to follow Jesus, or to be a Christian. I was just kind of going through the motions, and I was very young. I'm talking about from when I was first born all the way up till I was like 12, 13 years old. My mom and dad were both heavily involved in the church, helping with, my mom would sing in the choir, my dad would help with different things, but I just kind of was just there because that was where we were. I didn't read the Bible, when we worshiped, I just kind of stood back and did my thing. So that first stage of my life was just kind of, whatever.
Yeah.
And then the second stage, we can get more into this later. My parents ended up divorcing, and we moved to Alabama, where my mom's side of the family is. And I started going to church here at Oasis of Praise. And I got a little more involved, and I started kind of learning what it really meant to be a Christian, what it really meant to follow Jesus. But I didn't really buy all the way in.
Yeah.
For a while, I kind of was still just going through the motions. I started to do it because I wanted to do it.
Yeah.
So that was different. I came to youth on Wednesday nights, and I was excited to go. But that was kind of where it ended. It was a social hangout kind of thing, and I enjoyed worship, and I enjoyed coming to the message, but it was just because it was fun. And I didn't buy all the way in still, and so during that time, I was still living for the world. I dealt with what a lot of guys deal with, just lustful things, pornography and things like that. I wasn't a horrible child. I didn't do crazy stuff like some people might, talk about. But I would say lust was my biggest battle, and I dealt with that still during this time. I was probably, this is probably 14 to 16, 17 years old. And I was going to church, I was enjoying it, but I didn't give up anything in my life. I still was just doing what I wanted to do. And I wasn't talking about Jesus. He wasn't a big part of my life. He was just a part of my life, And then I would say probably about 3 or 4 years ago, when I was like 18, so about 3 years ago, I really started to buy into who Jesus was and what He taught, and to actually live for Him and the way that He teaches to live. I really started to read the Word and learn God's way instead of the world's way. And two things I think I learned through that, which I might be going ahead of the question a little bit, but
You're fine.
It's exciting.
You're fine.
Two things that I noticed a change in is that I had more purpose and I had freedom.
Yeah.
I think a lot of times when people look into Christianity, they see it as something that restricts you. But when I fully bought into it, I realized it was something that actually freed me from the way that the world does things, and I didn't want to do the things I used to do. And we can dive more into the specifics of that, but that's basically the summarized version of my past.
Oh yeah, that's really good. So with that, so tell me. So you said you found purpose in that. So basically, how taking all that from where you weren't fully bought in. Tell me about how you found Jesus in that moment, and tell me how Jesus saved you from that old life. When you found that purpose, what was specific when hey, this is God, I want to follow Him, and I know this is it for me.
Yeah, I think the defining moment. I'm not one of those people that can tell you the exact date and time that change happened. But I think specific-wise, what the difference is in my perspective that really made me buy all in was going from that attitude I had of just enjoying it and coming to church because it was fun, to then realizing Jesus was something I needed.
Yeah.
That I needed him in my life if I was going to have true joy, if I was going to have true purpose. And I've always been the type of person that, if I'm going to really do something, I want to do it all the way. And what I started to realize with Jesus is he's not something you can just half do in your life. You're going to be miserable. And that's what I found out is if you just half do church and half do the world, a lukewarm Christian, and have your foot here and your foot there, it's probably the most miserable place you could be.
Yeah.
You're better off just going all the way into the world and just living how you want to live, because you're not getting the benefits of either. You're not getting the benefits that come with Jesus because you're not fully living for him. You're still holding on to the world. And you're not really getting the benefits that come with the worldly life, because it feels good for your flesh. Yeah. But you feel bad doing it because you know it's wrong. And so it's really the most miserable place you can be, because you're not getting any kind of, motivation to get up in the morning and do what you do. It feels bad both ways. And so I guess that realization that if I was going to do this Jesus thing, I needed to do it all the way and just buy completely in. And further than that I needed him at my core. If I really wanted fulfillment in my life, if I really wanted to one day be with him in paradise, then I had to cling on to Jesus. It wasn't just something that could be part of my life. Yeah. And so when I did do that, I guess that difference in my why I woke up in the morning, my motivation for getting up every day changed from I always wanted to do something crazy with my life. I wanted to do a YouTube channel or just travel the world, and I always have that purpose of having a family one day, and that is a big part of something I want in my life, is to be married and to have kids. But I traded all that in to simply have Jesus. Yeah. I realized it had to start there. If I didn't get anything else I wanted in life, but I have Jesus and I have him and I can share him with all those people around me, then I have a purpose that will last me the rest of my life. Yeah. And just, even further than that, when we think of having Jesus, a lot of times we think of all the things he can do for us. But something really just recently Jesus has shown me is the whole point of Christianity, the whole point of the whole thing is to be at the feet of Jesus, to worship God, to just sit in his presence and to worship him. That is the ultimate purpose and goal of any believer, and really any creation of God. Yeah. That's the ultimate goal. That is what heaven will look like. Through our actions, through the things we do, we will worship him. We will be in his presence. And so to wake up every day and to remember that that's my end goal, to be at his feet one day, it changes everything about what you do in your life. It changes your why every day. It changes how you interact with other people, because at that point all you want to do is share with them the goal, the path you're on, and so it changed from something that I felt like I had to do, and again talking about like restrictions and things, the do's and don'ts and the religion of Christianity, and it took it a step further into that deepness, that oneness with you and Jesus, and that personal relationship, and that's where I've truly started to find freedom and started to find purpose in that. And that's something I'm 21 years old, and I'm just now kind of stepping into and realizing the fullness of. So, yeah.
The next question I would be talking about that. So when you made your decision and you found out your why and why you wake up every day, what in your everyday life changed? So, like, and more specifically, so once you committed yourself to Jesus, how did your everyday life saying, hey, I'm doing this for me, did the people you hung out with change, or did your habits change, or and it's not a sense of like saying they had to change, but like what'd you feel like you had to do once you committed yourself to Jesus?
I mean, the small things like reading my Bible more and praying more, those became things that I wanted to do, obviously, instead of just felt like I needed to. And I did see a difference there. But I think one of the biggest things I noticed in my own life is how I interacted with the people around me. I've always had a little bit of social anxiety and always, like, worried about what people thought. And when I got in social interactions, I always want to be the first to escape from it and not hang around longer than I had to, because it was just uncomfortable to me. Yeah. And I wouldn't say that has changed completely. Like, I still, a lot of times, find myself getting uncomfortable in social interactions, and it's not my favorite thing to do. But when I am in those social interactions, I find myself, wanting to share Jesus.
Yeah.
And wanting to find ways to bring it in the conversation. And not even just directly talk about Jesus, but to show others the joy that comes with that, and bringing others a little bit of light in their day, And even though it does make me uncomfortable, I want to do it because I know I have something that they can benefit from in their lives, And even people that I know about Jesus or believe in Jesus, to continue to uphold them. Like, even when we have conversations, it's nice to fellowship together and to hold each other up,
Yeah.
And I think that's something that's changed in my life a lot, is seeing the value in fellowship and seeing the value in every conversation I have with those around me and not taking that for granted.
Yeah.
Especially at work, where I work at, again, the Mercedes plant, and there's so much negativity there. There's so much negative talk about management there, and there's so much negative talk about just how the world is nowadays, and government, politics, and we could get into all of that, but there's always going to be something negative to talk about. And so to be that positive light in that environment is something I wake up every day and try to do. And in my past, I would never have seen myself being that person. In my past, I would have just been that guy that's, I'm just here to do my job. I'm here to make a paycheck and leave. I don't care about these other. They can say whatever they want. But now I have that deeper purpose that just goes past the paycheck, to where, I want to make a difference in the people's lives around me. And not that I would say I'm perfect all the time. I say things I shouldn't say, and I involve myself in conversations I shouldn't. And I'm working on that. But every day I still have that underlying goal to be that light, to share Jesus with someone that might not know him. And that's one thing I've realized as well, is that I might be the only Jesus that someone has in their life. I might be the only reflection of Jesus in their life, and I don't take that for granted. That's not something to take lightly. And so, to go back to the question, the biggest difference, I would say, just is how I see conversations with other people. That value I put on that now is not something to take for granted.
Yeah. So before we get into after the walk, going into your walk with Jesus, what would be one thing you would say if somebody's watching this and they're not a Christian, or they are thinking about pursuing a life with Jesus? What would you say to them that they've been in, like the similar situation where you've been in? Basically, like, hey, I've been living for myself and I don't know if this is the right way, or I've been dealing with anxiety or lustful thoughts, and I don't know how to get rid of them. How would you say that to a person who may say, maybe this Jesus guy is for me?
I would say either buy in or get out. Again, going back to being in between and trying to try Jesus out and try the world out is the most miserable thing you can do. And I was miserable for a long time because of it. If you're going to follow Jesus, if you're going to choose him, then choose him all the way and go all in with it. Believe that he is the solution to your anxiety. He is the solution to that lustful addiction or whatever addiction is, and go all in with that. Don't just let him be another attempt for freedom, be another attempt or solution to your problems in your life. Let him be the solution if you're gonna try him.
Yeah.
And what you will see with that, if you will just give it time and go through that process, is that he is everything you need.
Yeah.
And again, I would go as extreme as to say, if you're not gonna go all in with Jesus, then don't even try it. Either go all in with him or don't.
Yeah.
Because what's going to happen, and I know that sounds counterintuitive, but if you don't, if you step back in the world, what you're quickly going to realize is the world will never satisfy you. And you're better off coming to that realization and then coming back to Jesus than spending your whole life doing 50-50 with Jesus and never getting where you're supposed to go.
Yeah.
So just buy into something. There's a quote that says, stand for something or fall for everything. You can't have 2 feet on 2 different foundations. Take a full step, put all your weight on either Jesus or the world, and make a decision. And in the end, you'll be where you're supposed to be.
Yeah. Now that you have become a Christian, so How long? So I'll start the question by this. You can just answer it really quickly. How long have you been a committed Christian? Would you say, like, this has been the decision? How long have you been a committed Christian?
I'd say probably about 3 years. Since I was 18. So.
Okay.
Yeah.
So we obviously know that we don't want to sugarcoat anything. We know that the Christian walk is not sunshine and rainbows. We know there's trials and tribulations, because we know once you are committed to Jesus, then we have a real enemy out there who wants to trip you up and who wants to make you stumble. So my question to you is, what is one thing you can vividly remember God bringing you through while you were a Christian? So in more of a sense like, hey, I've dealt with this while as a Christian, not just because, it's still our flesh that we still battle every day. So what's one thing that you've constantly had to battle, or you're in a battle right now and you're still having to trust God's faithfulness through that?
Yeah. I think the biggest battle I've had while being a Christian these last 3 years is my battle with lust. Mm-hmm. I think a lot of guys can relate to that. And one reason I always try to bring that up, and you do the same, we have a Bible study we do, and we talk about it a lot, is it's something that we don't talk about enough, and we're not open about. And we think as Christians, we're not supposed to deal with that at all, and if we do, we're not true Christians. Yeah. And one thing I've realized in this battle is there's always going to be a temptation. Mm-hmm. You're never going to be, while you live on this earth, this sinful earth, you're going to have temptations in the forms of lust and drugs and alcohol, whatever it is that has a foothold on you. But for men, I think there is that lustful temptation for every guy. Mm-hmm. And, so that has been a big battle for me. And I think one thing that, and this is recent, I would say I've really gotten to a place where I can say I'm on the uphill part of this battle and actually seeing victory in the last couple of months. Mm-hmm. And I've, again, it's been 3 years that I've really bought into Jesus, so these are battles and processes you're going to go through. Mm-hmm. But one thing that really has helped me, I guess two things really that have helped me with this battle of lust, and I guess I'll get specific with that a little bit. I'm talking about pornography. I was really bad into pornography, and just really just in the mindset of lust, just thinking of lustful thoughts, and in a way of objectifying women instead of thinking of women in the way that God created them to be. Again, two mindsets that have helped me with that. Firstly is to be open about it and just talk about it, be vulnerable about it, because when you do, you take control over that thing that controls you. Yeah. I feel like, when you can't talk about something, it has control over you, because you're saying to it, you have control here, I can't talk about it freely. Yeah. But when you take that step of uncomfortability and get vulnerable and just say, hey, I have an addiction with porn, and it's winning, and I'm fighting it every day. And even the next time you feel temptation, get that friend and just be like, I've done this with Cole plenty of times, and just be like, hey, I'm feeling that temptation right now. Mm-hmm. There's so much freedom in that and so much victory in that, because you take control. You don't believe the lie that says, I'm never tempted, because you will be tempted. But you take the truth of it and say, I am being tempted, but I'm going to stand in Jesus' name, in victory over this thing, even though it is tempting me. So to just stand in that truth is the first thing. And the second thing that Pastor Coop, our associate pastor at Oasis of Praise, one thing he's told me about lust has really helped is every time you have one of those temptations, again, accept the truth that it's there, and then take that thought captive, and then compare it and think, one day I will have a beautiful wife that is just for me, that God prepared for me, and that will make all of this other stuff just fail in comparison. Yeah. And to just keep that pure thought, even if you don't have someone you're dating or planning to get married, just know that one day God has that woman for you, and that it's going to be so much better than any of these other temptations you can even imagine. And so I feel like those mindsets have really helped me gain freedom over that. And I would say I'm in a place now where Jesus is truly taken me on the other side of it. It's something I will share every time I get the chance to, because I know how many guys deal with it. Mm-hmm.
Okay, so my next question is, what's one piece of advice you would give to Christians? I guess you could, direct this towards, a male audience, since this is what we've been talking about. What's one piece of advice you could give them if they're dealing with lust? I know a lot of guys deal with lust in that sense, and they deal with it different ways. So what's one piece of advice you would give them to help deal with this situation that you have in the same way you dealt with it?
Yeah. I think this isn't a very Christian answer, but I think when we talk about stuff like this, we're not very practical sometimes. So I would say one practical thing that can help when you get like a temptation, like a specific moment where a temptation is coming in, you're alone in your room, we all know the time, and you start getting those thoughts, you start getting those temptations, and there's nothing in the way of stopping you, right? One thing you can do is just distract yourself with something. It says in Scripture, I don't remember the exact Scripture, but it says actually to run from lust. Run away from it. It's not something that you should stand and fight, but it's something to turn your eyes away from and find something else to distract yourself with, because your flesh is going to want it time and time again. So you have to find a way to turn away from it. So I think one practical thing you can do, I would say, get in your Scripture, get in your Word, but sometimes that's just not something that helps, because we'll be sitting there reading our Word and it's not going away. But one thing I've done that's helped is do something really uncomfortable. Do something you just really don't want to do, whether that's just go for a run, or go do some chores you need to do, or go take a cold shower even, or do some push-ups. Because what happens is it turns that part of your brain off, and you start focusing on this other thing. Instead of trying to fight that, you just go in a whole different mode. And what happens a lot of times is after that's over, you're not even thinking about it anymore. And that's been my personal experience. Now, not to say that you should fully rely on those things. The first thing to do is, again, ask Jesus for freedom from it. Ask him to help you to gain freedom over whatever that battle is. But there is times where you have to get practical with it, and you have to find ways to just get through those little battles. And I would say one thing I've done, again, is just get uncomfortable. Just do something you don't want to do. Because a lot of times I think we try to come up with an answer of, well, do something you like doing, play video games or feed your flesh in different ways. And sure, those can help temporarily, but I think a long-term solution that has helped me is to do something uncomfortable. Do something that completely flips that side of your brain off. And I've seen a lot of help with that and success with doing that.
So when talking about these things, what do you, have you set up like accountability? Have you set up like places where, if you do fall back into, that place, and I'm not saying that, it's fully like rampant again. It says like, if you fall back into that, what is one way, like, because obviously as Christians, we all fail. And we're going to, sometimes we have those mess ups and slip ups because we're not perfect. So when you do mess up, when you do give back in, unfortunately, to those lustful thoughts or something like that, and you may have experienced that, what's one thing that you do to like make sure, hey, I've messed up, so let me get back on track? What's one thing that you can do?
I mean, I think it's very simple. Just talk to somebody about it, like I've said before. I feel like that's the best thing you can do when you do mess up, is to not close off about it. I think that's where the enemy gets us a lot of times, is as soon as we mess up, he wants to beat us up about it and tell us every reason why we're too weak and we're not good enough. But the truth is, we all mess up. And if we would just talk about it and be open about it, especially right after something happens, that's where you gain victory over it. And in the future, you can stop it before it happens. So I think that's one thing I've done as well, is I talked to my pastor that was directly over me, Pastor Tim, is over both of us, our college and career pastor. I talked to you, I talked to my girlfriend, and those are really hard things to do, to talk to those people about something, as vulnerable as lust and pornography. But when I did that, especially right after something happened, there's so much like just freedom. Again, there's no other way to put it in that, because it separates you from that mindset of you're not good enough, and stops you from trying to even defend that. It says, yeah, I'm not good enough, but I'm talking about it. I'm exposing this truth instead of trying to hide it so I can get over it, instead of acting like I am over it already. You have to start there and realizing you're not strong enough, not without Jesus, and that you got to talk about it. You got to be open about it. You're not going to be able to do this thing on your own and just hide it and just fight it in your little closet all by yourself. All that's going to do is make it grow and fester. And so I would say, again, the biggest thing I did is to just try to turn someone or to close to someone around you. Never try to do it alone, especially with lust.
Yeah.
Have someone in your corner fighting with you.
All right. And so my last question today, since you've been very bold in sharing your testimony, what would you say to people who feel like their testimony is invalid? So kind of like, people feel like their testimony is not worthy of sharing. Mm-hmm. So because that's what this channel is basically all about, is just, people sharing their stories and what God has done for them. So what would you say to the people about the importance of sharing what you've been through, and also if they may not value their testimony when they hear somebody else's or something like that?
Yeah. That's something I've struggled with as well, is thinking I have a boring testimony. Mm-hmm. But one thing Pastor Tim told me was, that's a good thing, and that really the people that have these testimonies of these things that Jesus has brought them through is great. It's mm-hmm. awesome. But the people that have a boring testimony are the people that, kind of stayed close to Jesus, right? Mm-hmm. And so really, in a full sense, your testimony isn't about you. It's about Jesus and what He's done for you. And so no matter what it is, whether it's small or big, it's a reason to talk about what Jesus has done for you. Mm-hmm. And so if He's done anything for you, that's worth talking about. Mm-hmm. It doesn't matter what it is. Because at the end of the day, that's what it's all about, is to talk about Jesus, is to point to Jesus. Yeah. And so I guess at the core of it, you have to remember that your testimony is about Jesus, not about you. Mm-hmm. And so it doesn't matter what it is. It doesn't matter if all He's brought you through is anxiety, because He's brought me through anxiety. If that's your testimony, then tell it, because someone needs to hear that. Mm-hmm. Someone that is going through anxiety will hear your story, and you can help them, mm-hmm. and you can point them to Jesus. But if you're too, timid about your testimony because you feel like it's not good enough, and someone that has been through deaths and drugs and all these things, mm-hmm. and Jesus brought them things, those are beautiful and amazing stories. But that person that is just going through anxiety, that might not speak to them because mm-hmm. they haven't been through those things. Yeah. But the person that's been through anxiety and they hear that, they can relate to that, and you can help someone. You can be an effective Christian. And that's what Jesus is looking for, is someone that just is willing to share what He's done for them. Mm-hmm. And you'll be a lot more effective with that than trying to make up a story that's not yours.
Yeah. So that's good. Well, Andrew, thank you so much for coming on here.
Thank you for having me, man.
Really enjoyed it. Hope you guys enjoyed this first episode. And this is just the beginning of what I think is going to be just a great way just to glorify God through people, and what, like he said, it's you just telling God's mercy and grace and faithfulness towards us. And if you're watching this and you've dealt with the same things that he's with, you can reach out to us and either in the comments or on our Instagram page, and we can help pray for you. Maybe you've went through the same thing he's went through. So thank you so much for watching, and we will see you guys next week. Yes, sir.
All right, episode 1 is done.